So this past week, I got a lot of feedback on the previous class. That's one of the feedback that I got about our ephahs. I had to add a few things to it, but no, I did get feedback on. You know what I got feedback on that was real positive was that we used this question and answer type approach. You know, where I read the passage and I asked you guys to come up with your own questions as to what information that you need to have answers to the passage so it makes sense to you. And that appears to have gone over pretty well because a number of you gave me feedback and said that really helped out. And so we'll use that again when we get to this eighth night vision. That'll be coming up here shortly. I want to make a few comments before we get to that, though. One of those was in the questions and answers, the questions that you guys came up with, there were two answers that I failed to give, or we failed to get a conclusion to. One of those questions, we were looking at the flying scroll. And so if you want to go back to that, we're in Zechariah chapter 5, verse 1, and one of the questions was in verse 2, where it says, "And he said to me, what do you see?" The question was, who is the he? And it's really important to understand who the he is. Pronouns are used an awful lot in Scripture. And I guess that's done that way to be able to conserve space. But the he that is being referred to, who is that? I mean, is that the Lord talking? Is that an angel talking? Is that a person talking? Who's speaking there? And so a good rule of thumb to follow that I wanted to tell you about is when you come across a pronoun like that you can't identify who it is, you have to read before that. You have to back up and find who is the last person that's been identified. And that person typically is the one who that pronoun is referring to. In this case, we had to back up all the way to verse 2, and we find out in verse 2 that the he that is being referred to is the angel. This is verse 2 of the previous chapter, of chapter 4, that it's the angel who had been speaking to him. And that was the guiding angel. That was the guardian angel, we called him, or the helper angel. Remember, he had an angel that was sent to help him to understand what was happening. So we had to back all the way up to that to find out, it's verse 5. In chapter 4, verse 5, we find out, it says, "So the angel who was speaking with me answered and said to me, 'Do you know who these are?' And I said, 'No, my Lord.'" Well, the angel who was speaking with him was the guiding angel. And you see that over and over and over again. Now, the question always comes up where it says, wait a minute, he called him Lord. He called that angel Lord. Isn't he talking to the Lord there? Is that the angel of the Lord? And the answer is no. This is the term Lord here that's being used is one of respect. Master, teacher is a person would call someone Lord or Master if they are of a superior position in terms of knowledge. Jesus was referred to Lord even before they understood that he was Christ. And what they would, that reference that when they called him no Lord or yes Lord, that Lord would be yes Master, yes Rabbi, and you are superior to me in knowledge, and so I'm subjecting myself to you. And that's kind of the term that's being used here, where he's talking to the angel that was speaking with him, and he calls him Lord. He's not talking to the angel of the Lord there. So does that make sense? You guys with me on that? All right, that was one question. The other question that came up that we didn't ask was the purging question, where it says in chapter 5, verse 3, "Then he said to me, 'This is the curse that is going forth over the face of the whole land. Surely everyone who steals will be purged away, and everyone who swears will be purged away.'" What's the purge being referred to here? Well, it's death that's being referred to. That term purging there runs parallel with the words that are used when they found leprosy in a home in the Old Testament. Leprosy was an infectious disease, and what they wound up doing was they burned down the whole house. That's the kind of purging that's being referred to. So what the passage is saying here is that the law covers the entire land. It will permeate into every home. It will search out everyone who is a thief and everyone who has violated the third commandment of using the name's Lord in vain. Remember that we talked about last week. And those will be purged. And that's what the law does. That's the curse. And so everyone who sins will be purged. And of course, the whole idea of the law and the understanding of that is to turn to grace where God saves us, and those are the ones that will not be subject to the fire, of the purging fire. Okay? So that's the other answer to that second question. Everybody okay with that? Okay. A lot of heads rolling on that one. Okay. So one other thing I wanted to talk about, we spoke last week about idolatry and praying to a person who's not deity. And I wanted to comment on that just a bit, because I did a bit more studying in just the topic of prayer. Prayer is a form of worship, but I would take it a step further than that and say prayer is worship. Not prayer is just a form of worship, prayer is worship. In Psalms, David says this, let my prayer be counted as incense before you. Incense was used in the temple for God to worship God, and the aroma of the incense would go up into God's nostrils and he'd be pleased by that. And he identified prayer is incense. It was worship. In Revelation 5:8, that same parallel. And when the Lamb had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each holding a harp and a golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. The prayers of the saints are incense. It's worship. And then in Revelation 8:3, another angel came and stood at the altar with a golden censer. The censer is this like a bowl, and it has a coal in it, and the incense is put in that censer, and it creates the smoke. And so it says another angel came with the golden censer, and he was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. This is in heaven. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints rose before God from the angels. So they didn't offer a specific kind of incense to anyone other than God. And our prayers are worship only to be offered toward God. And when we think about our prayers of petition, when we get together or in your own private room, like in my office this morning, I have I drink 2 big mugs of coffee in the morning, and I have this thing I follow, my own little rules here, and it's called my first mug with God. So the very first thing I do in the morning is take that first mug, and that's what I do with my Bible, and I sit down, and that's my prayer time and my devotion time. In that private room, we are not speaking into the air when we talk to God. He is present. He's always present. Look, sometimes, and I know you guys have experienced this in prayer, there's what's called the manifest presence of God. You know He's there. I mean, you just know it. That's manifest presence. It doesn't happen all the time, but the point is, God is there. So when we're praying, we're not speaking into the air, we're speaking to the very existent, the knowledge, we're acknowledging that God exists. That's worship. When we request, make a request, we are worshiping God in the sense we're giving Him the attribute of omnipotence, that He has the power to grant that which we're praying for. We're acknowledging that to Him, and we are worshiping Him. When we're praying, we talked about this last week, that we're also acknowledging that He can hear us in our language. At the same time, He can hear somebody in North Korea that's praying in their language, and somebody over in Indochina that's praying in somebody over in Europe, all at the same time, all these prayers being offered up. He has the omniscience. So when we're praying, we say omnipresent, he's there, omnipotence, he has the power to answer our prayer, and omniscience, he has the knowledge to be able to simultaneously know and speak to multiple people, millions of people at the same time. So when I hear of someone that says that, well, I'm not praying to a statue, I'm praying to the person behind the statue, that's idolatry. That's idolatry, because you're giving that person the omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence, those attributes to them. And so that is an important point to remember. I just wanted to bring that up so that everybody's clear on that. Nick?
What is the first verse you read in the Psalm about prayer being a worship to God?
Yeah, that's Psalm 141, verse 2. Psalm 141, verse 2. Let my prayer be counted as incense before you. Okay, we're good on that? Any other point of question on that? All right, so look, we're going to get into now this last night vision. This is Zechariah 6, 1 through 8, the last one. And I'll read through that, and I want you guys, again, to come up with what questions do you need answer to have this thing make sense. A lot of symbolism that's here. So I'll go through this, and you guys come up with your questions. I'm in the wrong, here we go. Now I lifted up my eyes again and looked, and behold, 4 chariots were coming forth from between the 2 mountains, and the mountains were bronze mountains. With the first chariot were red horses, and the second chariot black horses, and the third chariot white horses, and the fourth chariot strong dappled horses. Then I spoke and said to the angel who was speaking with me, what are these, my Lord? And the angel answered and said to me, these are the 4 spirits of heaven going forth after standing before the Lord of all the earth, with one of which the black horses are going forth to the north country, and the white ones go forth after them, while the dappled ones go forth with the south country. When the strong ones went out, they were eager to go to patrol the earth. And he said, go patrol the earth. So they patrolled the earth. Then he cried out to me and spoke to me, saying, see, those who are going to the land of the north have appeased my wrath in the land of the north. All right, so we have questions that have come up. I know you should have 2, 3, 4, 5 questions. What are some of your questions?
That's the red horses.
Wait, what?
What's the north country?
What is the north country? Great.
What happened to the red horses?
What happened to the red horses? Yeah, because he only dispersed the black, the white, and the dappled. What happened to them? Good question. What else?
What do the colors mean? What do the colors?
Yeah, what do all the colors mean? We can cover that. What else?
Are they related to the horses in Revelation?
What about the horses in Revelation?
Are they related?
Are they related? Okay, good.
And what is a mountain of bronze?
Yeah, what about this bronze thing? What's bronze have to do with mountains? That's kind of a strange thing. Anybody else?
Is bronze like a strong metal? When you say bronze, does it mean actual bronze or just a bronze color?
It's a symbolism. It's bronze the metal. Yeah, that's what they're talking about. Why bronze? What's that have to do with it?
Is it a strong metal?
Well, I'm after questions now, not answers. Let's go ahead and finish that. What other questions do you have? Anybody else? I had one other than that. Why was God appeased by just the attack on the north? He says that in verse 8. All right, so let's take a look at this and find out what about these things. And one of the questions that comes up is the bronze mountain. And so, Frank, to answer your question there, bronze is associated with judgment. That's why bronze is there. Can anybody think of something bronze in the Bible that has to do with judgment?
Snake.
Snake?
Snake.
Good one. Remember this one? Numbers 21, 4 through 9. What's so important about that? What was that all about, by the way? What happened there?
People getting bit by serpents and dying.
Why? Why were they getting bit by serpents?
God's judgment.
What were they doing?
Worshiping something else.
Huh?
Somebody God. They were worshiping somebody else besides God.
Well, they were speaking out. They were sinning. Let's just take it to that. They were sinning, and so as a result, they were bitten by the snake. Then why then was this bronze thing lifted up? What was the picture of that?
Symbolism of Christ.
Yeah, but I'm talking about to the people back then. What was the message that God was trying to communicate to the people with the bronze serpent?
Put your eyes on me.
Well, it was. What were they bitten by? They were bitten by a serpent. What was the source of the serpent bite? Was sin. The bronze was judgment of sin lifted up. When they would look up, they would see the judgment of sin before them, and by looking on the one that was judged, their sin, they would be cured. They would be healed as a result of that. That's why Jesus said, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so the Son of Man must be lifted up. He who knew no sin was made sin for us, right? And so by looking at the man despicable, the one on the cross, and by looking upon that, then your sins would be healed. Ultimately, that's what we look at for our salvation, that sin was paid for by the one who was cursed on our behalf. That's the parallel between the two. So good on the bronze snake. There was another bronze brazen altar. What was the brazen altar, the bronze altar? That was the altar where the sacrifices would take place. Some poor little innocent animal, it became sin for the person. It was a picture of it. It became sin for the person bringing the animal. The animal was killed and judged on that brazen altar. And so we see judgment as a result of that. So bronze is a picture of judgment. We have those two components. Now also, when you have two mountains, there's something in between them, and that's called the valley. And so the valley between them becomes the valley of judgment. In the Bible, the valley of judgment is the valley of Jehoshaphat. And that valley of judgment is Jehoshaphat is between Mount Zion, Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives. And so that's the picture that's associated with it, that the valley is the valley of Jehoshaphat. And then we see these things called the horses. That the question, why chariots? In the early, in fact, the first night vision, there were no chariots with that. In fact, there were less horses there. You guys remember in the first night vision, that was the one with the man on the horse? There was a red horse, there was a white horse, and there was a dappled horse. There was no black horse there. Now we see a black horse being brought in, and we also see chariots. Chariots, what were chariots used for typically? Transportation. But in this case, they're war machines. They're like tanks, modern day tanks. They were typically armored, and on a particular chariot there might be a spearman or a bowman or both, depending upon the size of the chariot. So the picture of here is one of battle or of war or destruction, and yet we find the red horse, which is typically a picture of war, isn't it? In Revelation, we found that we had the four horses there. We had red was the color of war, black was the color of destruction, total absolute destruction, typically associated with the aftermath of that, like Gaza. You look at Gaza right now, that's the black horse has hit that place. The white horse is peace or victory, peace after victory, the declaration. And then there was the pale horse, and the pale horse was plague, that sort of thing. That was in Revelation. But what we have here is a dappled horse. You remember what the dappled horse was all about? What that was about? Spotted, it was a spotted horse. We think, it's not clear, but we think it's a picture maybe of some skirmishes, some war. It was white and red, white, dark brown kind of a color. And so it was not heavily one thing or another, but those things. So we have these 4 horses, and what's interesting is that the red horse is not sent anyplace. The focal point of this whole message is on the black horse, which is destruction, and we see that in as a result of verse 8. Where did he send the black horse, by the way? North. Yeah, to the north country. One of the questions was, what's the north country, right? What is that? All right, so the north country, he's speaking of the armies that invaded from the north, typically Babylon. Even though Babylon and Media-Persia are more toward the east, almost due east, they had to come around the desert in order to get to Israel, so they approached from the north. And so they were called the north countries. There's only 2 directions if you lived in Israel, and that was either to go north or go south toward Egypt. If you went east, that was a desert. If you went west, that was the Mediterranean. You know, so by traveling, and armies came either from the south or the north. So that's the picture here, is that the black horse was destruction that God sent to the north, and that seems to be the focus. He sends the dappled horse to the south, but the focal point is that the destruction was sent to the north country, Babylon, followed by the white horse, which is a declaration of victory and peace, like boom, boom, one after another. And one of the parallels that hit me as I was reading this there's no war here. You know, war is series of battles one after another. The red horse has no war. What's the picture of the north country? And I was thinking of what happened in the last couple of weeks, last month, Iran. Are we at war with Iran? No, we're not. But what did we do? One big bomb, and that was it. And that's the picture of what happens with Babylon. If you turn to Revelation 18, I found this to be pretty interesting. Fallen is Babylon, and look in verse 21. There it is. That's what I'm after. Think of a strong angel as a B-1 bomber. Listen to this. And a strong angel took up a stone, like the mother of all bombs, like a great millstone, and threw it into the sea, saying, Thus will Babylon, the great city, be thrown down with violence and will not be found any longer. What a picture that is, huh? Isn't that pretty similar to what we did with Iran? And one day, boom, there goes their nuclear weapons capability. Not at war with them, but total destruction of it. I think that's a pretty good parallel to what we see. Pat?
Is Babylon modern-day Turkey?
No. Babylon is in Iraq, and it's not very far from where Saddam Hussein was rebuilding Babylon right before the Gulf War. He was trying to bring that up. He saw himself as the second Nebuchadnezzar, and a lot of people that were studying Revelation were looking at that pretty interesting. That Babylon was going to be rebuilt. But anyway, the picture of this thing. If we go to Zechariah, let me get back to that. Verse 8, Then he cried out to me and spoke to me, saying, See, those who are going to the land of the north have appeased my wrath in the land of the north. In other words, God was appeased by this one great bomb that was dropped upon them by, it appears, angels. There's four angels. We don't know if these are the 4 angels, but it talks about 4 angels that are standing before him. Look at verse 5. And the angel answered and said to me, These are the 4 spirits of heaven going forth after standing before the Lord of all the earth. See that in Zechariah 6, verse 5. He's identifying the four chariots. He's saying the chariots are symbolic of four spirits. And so they're probably angelic. We don't know if it's the four living creatures, but we do know they stand before him night and day, serving him.
Steve?
Yes.
I've just got a little confusion. Dappled and pale, dappled horse and pale horse, dappled is,
Two different animals, okay?
dappled represents what?
Dapple, we think, because it's not defined, but it's spotted, and it appears to be sort of a white color with some red spots. So maybe of skirmishes, a little bit of war, and a lot of peace around, possibly that.
And the pale is plague.
Pale is plague. And we don't see the pale horse in this case. Again, the focal point of the whole thing is Babylon, the destruction followed by immediate peace, and like Revelation speaks of, fallen is Babylon the Great, the angel dropping the Lord's stone upon it, and it's done and his wrath is appeased. All right. Because that's where most of the pain of Israel came from, wasn't it? Didn't that come from up north, from Assyria, Babylon, and Media Persia would be the three. And so that seems to be the focal point that God's making here when you look at the entire 8 verses, or eight visions that he gives. Yeah?
What is in the old Bible, the King James says a bay, B-A-Y, horse. What is that?
The bay horse? Yeah, spotted, I think is what, or spotted, yeah.
Because they say dappled and then say the other one bay. Unless they're saying the guy who's dappled is a dappled and bay, that's the same.
Which verse are you referring to?
That's chapter 6, verse 3.
Okay, read your verse.
It says, I see what it is. It's the same horses. It says the third chariot, white horses, and for the fourth chariot, dappled and bay horses. So you got two kinds of horses, unless dappled and bay is
The same horse.
Yeah,
The same type. It's the same type of horse.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I think most other verses will just say that it's dappled. Now I got to tell you that most of the commentators I read, when they get to the dappled horse, it's one of those scratch your head kind of things. They don't have a real clear picture of it. So dappled bay seems to be the same type. But again, I think the focal point here is on black, destruction, Babylon. That's the picture. Yeah. One more thing I wanted to do. Let me get through this here. A couple of key takeaways. Things that we can, what are some of the things that we learned? It's interesting stuff, all the color horses and all that stuff. But what can we take away from this? One of those is that God has an end game. There's a termination point when judgment will descend upon the earth. Boy, that we know. Even the peace agreement that's going on right now with Jerusalem, we rejoice in that. We're happy about that. But folks, that's temporary. That's not going to last. We don't know how long it's going to last for. And we're glad that our president got involved in all of that, but this is a temporary thing. We know that true peace is not going to come until when? The Prince of Peace comes in and sits on the throne. That's when that will happen. So don't be surprised if this whole thing falls apart. We'll see. Second,
He doesn't use other countries to go against.
what?
He's not using other countries like Assyria and Babylon to go against people that he wants to pour his wrath out on. He's sending spiritual forces.
Yes. Yes. These
It makes you think of in times when all that is a common thing in tribulation.
Yes. Well, this is an end time event, what you're seeing there. This is not something that has happened in history yet. The destruction of Babylon has not taken place. Even though right now it's a deserted shell of something of a city, according to Scripture, this thing is going to be obliterated. You're not even going to know where it was. It's going to be totally wiped out. Nick?
I agree with what you're saying. I was trying in my own mind to take this peace treaty that's going on with Israel and see how it fits in with God's plan. And I think you're right. I think more than likely it's going to fall But the other possibility is, all these countries, these odd countries, are banding together to help Israel. We know that when the Antichrist comes, that he's going to have to stop the war of all these countries attacking Israel. And I could see where God could use this, where all of these countries were banding together for a peace treaty, they suddenly all turn against Israel. And that fits into God's plan, as well as having all these other nations against Israel.
Yeah, everybody's going to turn on poor Israel. And I think even the United States may be a component part of that. We're going to see a 10-nation confederacy. I don't know if the United States is going to be a part of that or not, but it seems that we won't have the power that we have now, the superpower capability, to be able to do what Trump is doing now and use our economic power and our military power as a way of coercing other nations to get along with this peace treaty. The United States is going to be minimized in some way. And if we may be strong enough to be one of the 10, I doubt it, but one of the 10 countries, it almost seems like it's very European, the 10-nation confederacy. You know, sort of like Rome, the areas that it controls. But those are the ones that will be in charge, and this little horn, who's not one of the 10 kings at the time, it's he, that person is going to be the one that orchestrates this peace agreement with Israel. They're going to totally depend upon him for this peace agreement, the 7-year deal that'll take place, which means that all the other nations will turn against him, so this peace agreement that's going on right now is temporary. And that's the point I was trying to make. It's a temporary situation. Yeah? Okay. So the other thing, we know that Babylon and all of its satanic systems that operate throughout the earth will be destroyed. That's a takeaway. That's what that massive stone is. And that we also know that it's only through the judgment of the bronze serpent, he who knew no sin became sin for us, that man can escape the final judgment of God. And we saw that with the bronze serpent. Okay, so those are your takeaways. On your worksheet, if you still have one, it's the last component. God will judge Babylon, the wicked city, with its idolatry and culture. The bronze mountains, Mount Zion and the Mount of Olives, form the valley of judgment. That's the valley of Jehoshaphat. The message in this vision to Zerubbabel and to Israel is that God will take vengeance on Israel's captors for what they have done to his people. Yeah? All right, I wanted to do one thing before we move on to by the way, this is the last of the review part, last of the night visions, and we're going to go into some new information if I have enough time to get there. But I wanted to show you guys this. I wanted to go through, if we take every one of the 8 night visions and look at the little message that came from each one and combine them together, listen to the big picture message. Here it is. I can only imagine that Zerubbabel and Joshua, after talking with Zechariah, putting all this together, what is the picture? What's the message? It goes like this. Here's your night visions. Israel is mine. I have chosen her and will again choose her. I will protect, defend, and avenge her. The beastly kingdoms of the world that destroy will not stand against whatever I construct. What they build is temporary. What I build is eternal, and they are terrified. I own Israel, and I will live again in a Jerusalem without walls. I am the Jehovah of hosts, Lord of armies. I will be her protector, a wall of fire around her. Your high priest Joshua represents you and your people to me. I will remove Israel's feces-stained, disgusting clothes of self-righteousness and give you a robe and headdress of righteousness, pure and clean. My branch of David, your Messiah, will one day justify Israel. I am the cornerstone, the stone of 7 eyes, who oversees my people. I will restore the temple. It will be built under the leadership of Zerubbabel and Joshua in your time. I will use these 2 anointed servants to light the lamp and feed the oil of the Holy Spirit to keep the lamp lit. The lamp is to be a light to the world. I will send my law to measure all of Israel, not just the country, but the people, even those living in faraway places such as Babylon and Persia, to reveal that every Jew falls short of my glory. I want the evil system of Satan and Babylon that my people have adopted over the years to be purged from my land and ejected from my temple and my city. And finally, I will bring judgment against the Gentile nations, and I will destroy all those associated with Babylon, the city, and Babylon, the system of Satan. So that's the message. If you were Joshua, if you were Zerubbabel, how would you feel having gotten this message after having been shut down for 2 years? And the Lord said, get back to work. Would you do it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I would too. To me, that's a very encouraging series of messages that God brought to these leaders through this one prophet.
Can we get a copy of that, please, sir?
Sure.
Beautiful.
Okay, I'll send this.
I'd love to have it today.
Say it again?
It doesn't have to be today.
Okay.
Next week.
All right. Did everybody want a copy of this? I'll get copies made. All right. All right. I'll have those for you next week. Okay. I don't have a lot of time left. Let me just cover one thing quickly, and we'll call it a day. We're about to get into new territory here, and this is something I hadn't shown you. This is a chart, and it would take me forever to go. This is a pretty complex chart from a guy who I think is a scholar, and he outlined the entire book with this. I kind of broke this down. If you look at across the top there, 842. If I could get you to remember that, I feel that would be pretty good. That's how I think of it. You know, the 8 night visions, the 4 answers, and the 2 burdens, and that outlines the entire book. And that's what that is. But there's a segment here that's called the branch. And that kind of appears on its own, sort of. It just kind of is there. Now, it starts right after the last night vision. And if you read through that, through the, as you're reading Scripture, it almost looks like you just kind of continue on and this appears. But it doesn't fit. It's not a night vision. This is something entirely different. It's almost brought out as God's big picture about what's He's going to do with Israel and the world. This one thing called the branch. And the reason I'm bringing all that up is that one of the things that I find, and we have to understand when we read Scripture, that the chapter breaks and the verses, that isn't part of the scrolls. The scrolls were just written in Hebrew, and it was just one word after another after another. There was no punctuation. You know, so when you're reading this thing, it almost sounds like it fits, but it doesn't fit. It's something entirely different, and that there's a definitive break there. You know, so it looks like there's time between the last night vision and the first of the 4 messages, or the first of the 4 answers there. There's a 2-year time break between the 4 and the 8, and I think the branch happens. It doesn't say this, but it makes sense to me that it happens somewhere between the 8 and the 4. And I'll tell you why. We haven't read this yet. I'm almost out of time here. I'll just finish up with this. That the branch is an instruction set to Zerubbabel, and it has something to do with an offering that's being made by the people from the north country, Babylon. The Jews up there took up an offering and they sent it down to Zerubbabel and Joshua. And what makes me think that this is separate is that if the temple construction had been shut down for 2 years, these people were at a point where it's like, this thing's never going to be rebuilt. I doubt that an offering would have been sent down then. I think an offering would have been made after they found out that God raised up 2 prophets. He gave them the message we just read, and that temple reconstruction had begun and things were going up again. And then I think they would have made that offering, which means that from Babylon, the communication back and forth And the travel time for these guys to come down with the offering, we're talking about months. So I think there's a time frame in there that's taking place. So if you can remember that, we'll finish up with that. Dee?
Can we have a copy of that for next week?
Yeah, I can get you this. You guys like that one? That to me is a pretty tough one to understand, but I'll be glad to give them to you, sure. You want that? All right, we'll print that out for you too. Any questions for anything we covered today? I'm out of time. I got about maybe 2 minutes. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll call it a day. Fred, can you?